All right, guys, this is our last uh, early church history lesson. So this is lesson 10. So I'm excited that we've made it. Looks like we made it. We'll regret that. Okay, let's go ahead and get into our PowerPoint without further ado. Um, so remember last time we were talking about definitely leading up to this of the split of the East and the West. We're seeing the popes becoming more and more just powerful, having more influence. They're going to have that and continuing that of we talked about a couple episodes ago, Leo the First. We talked about Gregory the First, and it's just kind of sort of centralizing of that power. And that's where we're going to be at is the state of the medieval church. Remember, so this is kind of that part of it's in between the patristics and the medieval age. The years don't pay attention to our categories, and so there's these bleeding ins and outs. But the papacy is still consolidating more and more power, and this is going to play huge further impacts because as they gain power, somebody's going to reap that benefit. And many years down the road, we won't talk about him, but most scholars kind of put around Innocent III as being kind of the supreme. He gets the most kind of benefit before the office starts to wane in power a little bit. And even still, there's so much power even when they reach that climax and they're starting to come down. There's so much power with the popes, and the Reformation will happen and different things like that. But the Middle Age will see the most power with the popes. B.B. Warfield has this great kind of I kind of summarized it like his quote is more the Reformation is the great climax of Augustine's doctrine on the grace and its triumph over his doctrine on the church. I kind of included that, but also kind of actually reworded him a little bit of like, because he's his further context of the argument of that kind of where that quote comes from is that Augustine's work still we're dealing with, and the next 1,000 years are going to wrestle with what exactly he was talking about and his doctrine of the church. Remember the sanctity of the church, the power of the church. When we were talking about Augustine and his controversy with the Donatists, remember those Donatists were the ones saying these people, they named names during the persecution of Diocletian, and kind of these last remnants and stuff of the persecutions that this really, hurt them of these people were baptized by these false traitors and stuff. And so they were keeping up with that and saying that you were qualified to be a priest based on, your lineage a little bit and stuff. And Augustine basically said, no, it's on the office and it's held by the office and stuff. And so he definitely has a huge influence towards the doctrine of the church. And how the church works a little bit, but also he's very famous for his doctrines of grace. He's called the Doctor of Grace, and not the doctrines of grace in the sense that Calvinism comes out of with its 5 points, though he plays a part in that. He's influence for John Calvin and some of the later reformers. Luther was an Augustinian monk himself of the order and different things, but he talks more on grace. We were talking about earlier lessons of kind of, God calling to us, the word predestination is thrown in there, of God calling and acting on us first. And so his doctrine of concerning grace, we'll say that instead of doctrines of grace, his doctrine concerning grace comes into battle there. Just put a picture of Rome, just because we're talking about the papacy and the power that's being held in Rome. So that's just St. Peter's Basilica. The modern one that you see there from present day, that was constructed 16th and 17th century, but there's always been a church there. There's always been kind of the church of Peter. building off that tradition of Peter, died in Rome, and things like that. And so, but Rome, just showing you a little bit of the power that Rome is going to have, and the popes are going to battle the East and the emperors in the East, and Constantinople. I think, did I put Constantinople? Yes, I thought I put Constantine for a second. No, I got it right. Okay. Anyway, moving into now, I also kind of want to do a little bit quicker. I feel sometimes my lessons get longer, and there's not as much information as if I'm trying to shorten them. So short, sweet, to the point. Here we go. There's theological controversies now at the end of this. One of the ones is going to be the sacrament of baptism. Okay, and so obviously this is a class for Hardened Baptist Church. Again, we've kind of talked about this before a little bit. So obviously I'm talking as a Baptist, as a member of a Baptist church. But what's going on here is that this is when the baptism of infants is definitely gathering steam. Universal acceptance might be a little strong. I kind of regret that wording, but what's going on is it's gathering a lot of support. Augustine's arguing for it. It's been argued for plenty of times before, but Augustine's really going to kind of help push this on. Pope Leo the First, Gregory, all of these guys are kind of pushing and piggybacking off of this, his writings and stuff. And he talks about kind of the alien faith from those in the church being bestowed upon the infant. And that kind of leads further down there. Medieval theologians are going to develop this topic, not time. I don't know why I messed that up. Sorry for the grammatical errors. But the church is going to maintain a kind of treasury of merits. And so there's three categories for, eternal rest, eternal destination: heaven, purgatory, and hell. That's what's going to kind of build in this time period. And so most of the people are going to go to purgatory. The saints, Jesus, Mary, a lot of them immediately arrive at heaven. And so there's these leftover merits, this leftover faith, if you will, that kind of builds into this treasury. And I think I'm saying this right. I don't want to get this wrong and also misrepresent someone, but this is kind of where the practice of indulgence and indulgences are eventually going to come from, of this building up of the treasury and buying those graces, if you will. Obviously, as a Protestant and as a Baptist, disagreeing entirely with this. So trying to give you a accurate picture of what it is, and then also trying to help you a little bit wrestle with it in Scripture and different things. I haven't studied the alien faith a lot from Augustine. I would assume maybe they use, is it Mark 2, the paralytic, where his friends come and Jesus says, your faith has made him well. They might use that. I don't know. I've heard of that being used before, but I haven't done enough research on that. So I'm still learning and growing and interacting with doctrines that I just don't have a ton of experience with. So lessons to learn for all of us. Another huge one, icons. And this is particular in the East. The West, this doesn't get as heated, as much of a debate. This rages for a long time. It's finally settled at the Council of Nicaea #2. That's in year 787. And that kind of builds and settles out these two camps. There's the iconophiles, so they're for the use of icons, and the iconoclastics, and they are against the use of icons. So one group is saying we don't use them as idols, they're not for worship. The other is saying they're against the use of idols, saying that is worship, you're breaking the second commandment. And so just kind of progressing down that line. This will be the last ecumenical council that's kind of that main frame accepted by the Eastern Orthodox Church. They are going to separate in 1054 and kind of continue on with their own, faith, their own branch, their own doctrine. And we're going to kind of talk a little bit more about the East, mainly because we're building that up. In the West, we kind of have that that already purgatory and eventually indulgences is coming from purgatory and the treasury of merit, infant baptism. But that is kind of happening in the East. The East is also developing. Oh, this is just included this an example of kind of a picture of what you would find on an icon. So they are to be honored, not worshipped. One of the arguments for their use was that it is instructing the believers that a lot of them couldn't, read at this time, but there was these pictures and different examples of biblical events and acts, just like this looks like. Christ is healing. Looks like a crippled woman is being brought forth. Um, there's a person with looks like boils or skin disease, leprosy maybe, being brought forth to him for healing. Looks like a couple of other people who might be able to walk, paralytics, and then looks like even a demon-possessed man, a chained person. So they're being basically this is picturing, an event from like Matthew 8 of healings, different things, parables that they would have around to help worship towards that. That's obviously a very foreign thing to us, especially I guess in this region. Even at a bigger city, we would have more interaction maybe with an Orthodox church, but in where I live, it's not so. So just trying to kind of give you all a little bit of a picture while moving it forward. So here's two more developments that are going on. I think they're so interesting. Epiphatic theology, and then deification. The first one, the apophatic theology. So this is also called negative theology. And so it's describing and talking about God, but what he is not. And so it's kind of rooted in those ontological arguments, ontology. Remember, that's the study of being. So remember when we were talking about, I think it's in lesson 1, all the way back of Plato and kind of these wrestlings of being and purpose and forms. It's kind of building off of that. And I included just a quote from John of Damascus, and there's a little picture of John of Damascus for you. But all that is comprehensible about God is his incomprehensibility. Professor Thatcher, could you please settle down? Please sit. He's looking out the window. I have a colleague here who's helping me teach tonight. Anyway, so this is kind of that thing of what God is not, of he is incomprehensible, and the best way that we can kind of talk about him is he is not. So like, whereas we would talk on God is holy, a way of kind of teaching that in its inverse, kind of parallel, would be that God cannot look at evil. God is not evil. Sort of that kind of inverse teaching a little bit, if you will. Again, this is another kind of newer kind of theology and understanding of doctrines to kind of learn about. The other one is deification. And so this deals with Christians becoming free from corruption, and that this is then inviting them to participate in the divine nature of becoming believers and becoming a part of the body of Christ, accepting that, and then becoming and taking on that divine nature of oneness with Christ. And so they're made deity-like, divine-like, is what the believer of the we're becoming more and more like Christ. In that maybe of wrestling with that of soteriology. So that's kind of, the theology of salvation, of the understudy of the study, of salvation, using, I kind of went on to the Orthodox Church for this part just to kind of find some scriptures that they would use. 2 Peter 1:4. This is Peter kind of inviting his audience right at the beginning of his letter that you may become partakers of the divine nature, escaping the corruption that is in the world because of sinful desire. And so he's kind of bringing this picture of we are not what we once were. Kind of a Galatians 2:20. I've been crucified with Christ. It's no longer I that live, but he that lives in me, of kind of taking on that divineness in a sense of that we are a new creation. Second Corinthians 5:21. So that new creation, a little bit of we are those partakers in that. Another one used is Psalm 82:6. You've probably heard that of where the psalmist, Psalm of Asaph, I said, "You are God's sons of the Most High, all of you." He even continues in the next verse, "Nevertheless, like men, you shall die and fall like any prince." And that is the next verse, verse 7. And so that's just kind of building that of, okay, you are no longer just a person. You are now being indwelled by the Holy Spirit. You are a new creation, that you are not just, a person anymore, of, flesh, which, we would argue also that there's soul, but that you have now been remade, that you are no longer sinful nature, and you are becoming more and more like Christ, which we will be resurrected, and we will be united with Him in a new body. Revelation, promises great, wonderful things of a new heaven and new earth. But this is still something I'm also learning more about. So I don't know fully, kind of learning it as we go along together a little bit. So but the East is definitely, you can see doctrines that you may yourself be sitting here going like, I've never heard of that. Or you may be going, Jackson, you are horrible at this. I apologize. Please shoot me a text message or an email, a message on Facebook that I can help learn a little bit more and maybe present it a little bit better. But you can see these theologies are definitely exploding here right now of the church and its understanding of salvation and Christology. All right, rise of Islam. We've kind of been hinting at this bit by bit by bit, but here it is, Muhammad. So he is born roughly, we think in 570, 570s. He lives to 632. He is born into a poor trading family. In 622, he's going to rule Medina. 630, he will conquer Mecca. And so this theology and ideology spreads pretty rapidly and pretty quickly. They're going to overthrow the Persian Empire in 642. I mean, it rapidly gets a lot of followers. And there's different answers and thoughts on why it increases so quickly. Some scholars I've read kind of argue that it offered a easier to understand thought on God as one, that it didn't have the Trinity kind of wrestling with the different things. Some kind of, wrestle a little more that it was new, kind of a blending a little bit of their understandings with different culture and stuff. Thatcher's wanting to be a part. Thatcher has some ideas on why this is kind of gains popularity. Muhammad definitely gets a lot of people interested very, very quickly. You'll see here the ancient Christian world is swiftly just moving. You're going to have old cities like Antioch and Alexandria and Jerusalem, and they're going to fall under the influence and be in Muslim captivity. They're going to be now, mosques instead of churches, which granted, Alexandria a little bit. Egypt will kind of maintain a little bit of hold with the Coptic church. Will kind of maintain kind of a area in there a little more than some of the others of their kind of disappearance. But anyway, all the way from China and India throughout the Middle East to the Atlantic Ocean and Spain by 732, it's, almost just, 100 years after his death, it's become massive of just the spread of this and its influence. Here's just a picture to help you kind of see where that's going. So all the way very, very, far east, in modern day Afghanistan, some Pakistan, it's spreading further and further, all the way to modern day Spain and Portugal. They cross that Gibraltar Strait and definitely, I mean, it's just massive amounts of territory. And so I'm just going to hang here for a split second so you can kind of see the map a little bit better. But we're going to talk about this battle. Who's kind of got this these arrows up here. It's right above the kingdom of the Franks. So this is going to eventually become France. You see Paris. And so they are stopped about 150 miles from Paris as Charles the Hammer Martel, which is just the best name in the world. I love that. Charles the Hammer. Super cool, obviously. His weapon of choice was a hammer. But his armies defeat the Muslim armies. And so this kind of coexisting takes place. The Muslim armies stop there, halt, create communities and cities and stuff. And so Christians are going to start to be influenced by their super close neighbors who are, Muslim and practice the faith of Islam. And so along with this new religion, they're going to bring tons of different things from cultural and scientific. Thank you for the Arabic numbers because math is now easier. Calculus is going to, explode, and one day math is going to be popular. And thank goodness Rome doesn't use the Roman numerals anymore, so that Pope Gregory eventually can get that Gregorian calendar, which we use now. Thank you. A lot of different stuff happened because of that. But another huge one is the philosophical. And so it's kind of interesting because we talked about Aristotle at the beginning. You even knowing, as much as I know about philosophy, Aristotle's a big name, right? We can't just ignore him. And so Aristotle is coming back because he's actually been, his legacy, his teachings have been maintained and kept and treasured by the Muslims, and just that area has been, treasured and kept it up. So his works have continued on, but they really grab a hold of that. And the popularity of Aristotle is going to be huge. Plato's not going to be top dog anymore. And the medieval church, scholasticism, Aquinas, just saying some of these names, the growth of universities are, not too far away of different things. And so it's going to be huge. Aristotle and his kind of line of thinking is going to influence the Catholic Church as the Catholic Church definitely becomes more of what we know it now as, for lack of a horrible sentence. But this is kind of building this. So you're definitely seeing we're, not very far away. What is it? Year 800. We're going to see Charlemagne crowned king of the Holy Roman Empire. So the Holy Roman Empire is not very far from being created, and the king will be knighted to kind of unite Franks and different tribes in Germany of things like that. And then fun fact, if you're like, man, Holy Roman Empire, that just sounds so long ago. Like, they will last until they are defeated in the Napoleonic Wars. So Napoleon, like 1800s, like the French Revolution's happened, and now finally Napoleon takes power and like goes all the way, tries to, take over Russia and the weather. Like, so I'm telling you, like 1,000 years, like this is a huge, long-lasting empire, and it's very, very fascinating. We need to know about it. It's huge. It's going to change Christianity. It's going to bring about the popularity of the Catholic Church. Eventually, the Catholic Church is going to start to lose its popularity, though, with the Reformation. King Henry VIII, in the 1500s, is going to be like, no, like, I want my divorce. He's going to separate from the Catholic Church, have their own Protestant denomination, Anglicanism, the Church of England coming up. The Ottoman Empire is going to become that main powerhouse of Muslim rule. They will have huge gains in far west, in Spain and Portugal, but also in the Far East, something like Albania, Bosnia, modern day kind of places of Kosovo, different things around the Black Sea, around the Caspian Sea. We'll have those. They get pretty close to, trying to think of the city in Eastern Europe. Suleiman the First gets pretty far. which I can't remember how far he gets, but they have different invasions throughout. You'll see the Holy Wars come, King Richard of Lionheart, like different things. And so horrible things are going to happen also, though, of the Inquisition. Um, Reformation happens, which is a good thing. We needed that. Johannes Gutenberg and his printing press, like we're on the cusp of getting all these huge important things, and history is just crucial. I hope you're just like starting to realize, whoa, like we've got so long to go, and this is where we're going to end. We're going to talk real quick, though, that God is sovereign over all. He is the author of creation. There's nothing in history that has ever surprised him. There's nothing that's taken him off guard. That he is good, and he is working all things for his good, and he is bringing about his kingdom. And he uses messes like us. That the church is not perfect. None of us have been, met that perfection that is coming soon when we are part of the church victorious. That's another thing used, Catholic theology, but Lutheran theology also, in particular, Protestants use it. The church militant, that's the church here. We are at war, and then the church victorious, the church triumphant in heaven with Christ and God forever. And so we are going that way. We are moving that direction, each and every one of us. So God is good, and he is active in history and uses history, and it is vital and important for us to study history, but to not get tied up and remember, as Augustine said in The City of God, that at the end of the day, when people start to focus maybe on politics or different things, our hope is in God and God alone, and that the city of God, the new Jerusalem, the new heaven, Zion, where we will reign and be forever with Christ, not the city on earth, not, what Revelation would call the city of Babylon. So it loses, Satan loses, and all of history is a part of that divine telling. And so while this history is not like the history in the Bible, so like the historical books, Samuel, Chronicles, those are divinely inspired. Our history books now are not, but they're vital, they're important, and they're useful. We want to make sure that we don't mix the two. So I hope that this has been super helpful. I pray that you will forgive me if I've made mistakes or said something wrong, that if I unintentionally said something or just misquoted, please offer grace. And I pray that this would be stepping stone for some, and that history would become a lifelong passion, just as it's been I have a shorter life, but it's become a lifelong passion. I know it's just the books and the time spent reading and enjoying history. And then I'm getting a call, and then just being able to live that out. So I pray that this blesses you, and that we will have this soon. So au revoir.